"She's for my dog," a man said. But before I became property, I was a daughter. Before I was chained, I was loved. They didn't sell me to a man. They sold me to a dog. All it took was one signature, and I became property. Not of the billionaire, but of his beast. I was dressed up like a pet, chained like a prize, and locked inside a mansion built on cruelty. But what they didn't expect was that I'd survive. And when their weapon turned on them, I ran. I ran not just to escape, but to expose them all. They thought no one would believe me. Now the world's about to hear everything. Before they sold me, before the cage, the silence. I had a mother who hummed lullabies into my hair. I had a father who danced with me on bare concrete floors, even when our bellies were empty. We didn't have much, but we had love. And when Mama laughed, it lit up every corner of that broken room. Then came the cough that never stopped. The nights she bled quietly into her pillow. We didn't have money for a doctor, so I sat by her bed and prayed that love could cure what medicine couldn't. When Mama died, Papa unraveled like thread through a needle. He worked 3 jobs, forgot how to sleep, and drank just to remember her smile. The rain didn't stop the car. It didn't stop the blood. They buried him next to Mama and left me with grief no one wanted to carry. The relatives came with plastic smiles and promises they didn't mean. They said they'd help me heal. But healing wasn't free. That's how it began. Not with fire, but with abandonment. Not with a choice, but with a price tag.
The auction house sat on the city's ragged edge, a grimy maze of rusted cages and cracked concrete. The sun hammered down mercilessly, both human and animal, packed tightly like unwanted goods. Lila's bare feet scraped the dusty ground as she was jostled forward, her skin prickling under the relentless gaze of the crowd. Her sharp eyes scanned the faces pressed around her, each one a predator in a different guise. Some wore bored, disinterested expressions, others sneered with cruel amusement, but all carried an unspoken hunger, an appetite for power, for control. Her family's desperate whispers had sold her. A bitter transaction traded for a few meager bills that barely filled a pocket. The memory of their haunted faces, twisted with shame and resignation, burned like acid behind her eyes. She swallowed the lump in her throat, forcing herself to stand tall and refuse to crumble. Mixing with the faint metallic scent of blood from recent wounds she dared not touch. Her breath came ragged, chest tight, as she tried to block out the jeers and the indifferent murmurs swirling around her like a storm. Across the crowd, a man stood apart, tall, poised in a tailored suit that seemed absurdly out of place amid the filth and decay, watching her with unsettling calm. There was no mercy there, no flicker of recognition of her humanity. It was as if she was a ghost, a shadow no one would mourn. The auctioneer's voice boomed, cutting through the tense silence like a whip. Next up, female, 19 years old, healthy, strong. The crowd murmured, some casting sidelong glances, others already turning away, bored or uninterested. The words felt hollow, a cruel echo of the life that had been ripped from her. Then the man in the suit stepped forward, his movements smooth and deliberate. "I'll take her," he said smoothly, his voice low and commanding. The auctioneer nodded, raising his gavel with a sharp nod. "Sold." A hush fell over the crowd, followed by confused whispers and murmurs. "For the dog?" Someone questioned incredulously, disbelief coloring their tone. The man's faint smile didn't reach his eyes. "She's for my dog," he said simply, as if the statement required no further explanation. Lila's heart skipped, disbelief and dread twisting inside her like a cold, crushing vice. No one in the crowd moved to stop the sale. No one tried to save her. The gavel slammed down, echoing finality through the grimy walls. Her fate was sealed, and the shadows around her deepened. Her mind screamed for escape, for rescue, but the silence of the crowd was deafening. She was alone. The black limousine cut through the sprawling iron gates, its tires crunching on the gravel driveway lined with sculpted hedges that gleamed under the afternoon sun. The manicured perfection of the grounds was a sharp contrast to the grime and decay of the auction house she had just left behind. Lila's ragged clothes clung to her thin frame, a stark and painful reminder of everything she had lost. The mansion loomed before her like a fortress, gleaming marble walls that reflected the harsh sunlight, towering columns carved from flawless stone, and crystal windows that caught the light with cold indifference. It was a palace built not for comfort, but for power, isolation, and control. Her heart hammered violently against her ribs as the car came to a stop beside a massive oak door, carved with intricate symbols that seemed more ornamental than welcoming. A silent servant in a starched uniform appeared, his face expressionless and unreadable. Without a word, he opened the door and gestured for her to step inside. No kindness, no acknowledgement of her presence, only the cold efficiency of a well-trained servant. Lila was led inside, her footsteps swallowed by the cavernous hallway that stretched before her like a tunnel of silence. The scent of polished wood and expensive leather filled the air, alien and suffocating. The marble floor was impossibly smooth, reflecting the dim light from crystal sconces that lined the walls. The oppressive grandeur pressed down on her, making her feel smaller, more insignificant than ever before. Her throat tightened as she swallowed the lump of panic rising in her chest. Every echo of her footsteps seemed to mock her loneliness. From somewhere deep within the house came the low guttural bark of a giant dog. The sound vibrated through the floor and walls, reaching her ears like a dark omen. Lila's stomach twisted with a mixture of fear and revulsion. She was not here for a person. She was property, a possession meant to serve some cruel fantasy. The servant opened a door at the end of the hall, revealing a room unlike any kennel she had imagined. Plush cushions lined the floor, velvet drapes softened the walls, and golden bowls sat heavy with water and food. The air smelled faintly of lavender and something metallic, a strange mixture of luxury and menace. It was a prison gilded with opulence, designed to mock rather than comfort. Lila's hands trembled as she stepped inside, every nerve screaming in protest. Suddenly, a shadow crossed the doorway. A massive figure, fur black as night, eyes blazing with fierce intelligence. Titan. The dog's gaze locked onto Lila's, sharp and possessive, as if she were a prize to be guarded or a threat to be subdued. He moved forward silently, nostrils flaring as he circled her, marking her not with affection but with ownership. His presence was overwhelming, a force of nature contained within a monstrous beast. Lila swallowed her rising panic, fury igniting beneath her skin. This was no pet, no companion. She was a thing, a trophy for a monstrous game. Her fists clenched, nails digging into her palms as she fought to keep her voice steady. The servants retreated, leaving her alone with Titan's heavy breathing and the cold weight of the collar she had been forced to wear. She pressed her back against the cool wall, heart pounding in defiance, mind racing for a way out. A voice whispered behind the door, cold and distant, "She belongs to us now." Lila's eyes burned with a silent vow. She would not be broken. Not here, not like this. But as Titan's fierce gaze held hers, she realized the real battle had only just begun. The world outside moved on, oblivious. Lila's name was whispered only faintly in a few distant news reports. Missing girl, possible abduction, but no one connected the dots. The city's sprawling streets bustled with life, indifferent to the nightmare unfolding behind the mansion's iron walls. Her family, swallowed by shame and fear, said nothing. The crushing weight of their silence was a betrayal deeper than any chain. The city's indifferent hum pressed against the mansion's walls, muffling her cries before they could escape. Inside, the servants carried on with mechanical indifference. Their eyes slid over her like she was a piece of furniture, a decoration for Titan's domain, something to be ignored or dismissed. The opulent kennel was no refuge. Velvet cushions and polished floors couldn't soften the humiliation that gnawed at her soul. Lila's hands gripped the cold marble edges as she pleaded softly, "Please, not like this." But the only response was the distant clink of glasses and laughter from beyond the heavy doors, a cruel soundtrack to her captivity. Alexander King, a giant of a man with a smile as cold as ice, held court in the grand ballroom. Lila crouched just out of sight, shadows swallowing her small frame. She watched his guests swirl in glittering gowns and tailored suits, their voices rising in careless joy. None noticed her, the gift hidden in plain sight, a living possession, tethered to a monstrous dog named Titan. Her breath caught when she overheard a low voice between two guests standing near the doorway. "That girl? She's not for him. She's for Titan, a plaything." The words struck like a blow, not a person, property, an object to be shown off, controlled, broken. Lila's heart thundered in her chest. The bitter truth settled deep. No one was coming. Not her family, not the city, not the world that had passed her by. She was invisible, trapped inside a gilded cage, owned by a man who viewed her as less than human, a prize for his beast. Tears stung her eyes, but she swallowed them down hard. If no one would save her, then she would have to save herself. The mansion's shadows stretched long as the party raged on, and Lila's resolve hardened like ice, cold and unyielding. She would not disappear quietly. Not yet. The collar gleamed under the cold chandelier light, gold filigree twisted into cruel elegance, ornate patterns disguising the harsh reality beneath. It felt like a trophy, a mockery of ownership pressed against Lila's skin. The smooth surface was cold, unforgiving, sending a shiver down her spine each time it caught the light. She stared at it, her fingers trembling with a mix of rage and despair, then slipped it slowly around her neck. The clasp snapped shut with a quiet final click, the sound like a death sentence in the vast silence of the mansion's kennel room. Her heartbeat thundered, a wild drum in the stillness. Marble floors stretched into shadowed corners, reflecting the opulence that mocked her imprisonment. Velvet curtains hung heavy, muffling the distant sounds of laughter and clinking glasses from the grand halls beyond. Titan lay on his throne-like bed, his dark eyes watching with unsettling calm. His presence was a silent reminder. She was not a guest here. She was property. Lila's jaw tightened, teeth clenched as the chains that bound her wrists rattled softly with her movements. The heavy iron loops bit into her skin, cold and unyielding, echoing the collar's cruel symbolism. But beneath the weight, a fierce defiance sparked, a flame she refused to let die. When the head butler appeared, his face a mask carved from stone, Lila's pulse quickened. Her escape attempt had been reckless, desperate. She'd slipped through the labyrinthine corridors, past the cold marble pillars, heart hammering in her ears. Freedom had been a breath away until his shadow caught hers. "No," he said quietly, voice low and unforgiving. His grip was iron as he dragged her back to the kennel. "This is not your world." Titan's eyes followed her, unblinking, as she was chained to the wall once more. The collar tightened, almost painfully snug. Lila's fingers brushed the cold metal, every nerve aflame with humiliation and the sharp sting of determination. "I'm not yours," she whispered, voice raw but steady. "Not yours to own." The dog's growl rumbled softly, a warning, or something else. Lila met his gaze, unflinching, the battle for control unspoken but fierce. The mansion was a prison, but she was still human, still fighting. Behind the heavy door, footsteps receded, yet her resolve solidified. If this was a cage, she would find the lock, and she would break it. As she crept along a narrow servant's passage she discovered behind a loose panel, Lila pressed herself against the shadowed wall, heart pounding so fiercely it echoed in her ears like a drumbeat of hope and desperation. "Did you see the papers?" a woman murmured, her voice trembling. "Alexander's obsession is worse than we thought. It's not just the dog. It's everything. Control, possession." "Shh," another warned, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "If he finds out we talk, there'll be no mercy. That dog is his weapon, but he's a monster behind closed doors. Everyone's scared. If Alexander's power was built on secrets, maybe those secrets could be turned against him." She edged closer, eyes catching a crack in the heavy oak door at the corridor's end. Papers were strewn across a massive desk. Photographs pinned to a corkboard showed Titan in unnatural poses, wires and strange devices attached to his massive form. Contracts and legal documents bore Alexander's seal, proof of ownership, not just of land or business, but of her. A cold shiver ran down Lila's spine, her breath hitching. This was more than kidnapping. It was a twisted empire of possession. Suddenly, footsteps echoed down the corridor. Lila froze, heart thudding wildly. The talk ceased. The corridor fell silent, the shadows swallowing the whispers like a shroud. She backed away carefully, tracing her steps with deliberate care, every sense alert to the slightest sound or movement. Titan's low growl rumbled faintly from the distance, a reminder of the beast she was chained to. Lila's eyes burned with new resolve. If Alexander's fortress was built on secrets, she would find the cracks and break through. The mansion was no longer just a prison. It was a battlefield, and Lila was ready to fight. The vast training yard shimmered under the harsh midday sun. Lila stood stiffly beside the ornate fence, her collar's weight a dull throb against her neck, every movement reminding her of her captivity. Titan, regal and imposing, paced with deliberate grace, his golden fur gleaming like burnished bronze in the sunlight. His muscles rippled beneath his sleek coat, a living testament to power and control. Alexander King's sharp commands sliced through the air, each word delivered with chilling precision and absolute authority. Sit. Titan's ears flicked, but his eyes remained distant, scanning the horizon as if searching for escape, or something beyond the commands he was forced to obey. Lila's heart pounded, watching the dog's every twitch, every subtle shift of his expression. She had been forced to join these sessions, an unwilling participant in a twisted ritual where Titan was king, and she a mere shadow. Yet beneath the dog's fierce exterior, Lila caught something unexpected, a flicker of unease, a hesitation that betrayed the illusion of absolute control. Alexander's voice hardened, sharp and uncompromising. Focus, Titan. You are the alpha. You own everything here. Titan's growl rumbled low, but it wasn't directed at Lila. It was sharp, sudden, a snarl that ripped the air as Titan's gaze locked onto Alexander himself. The billionaire's smile faltered, eyes narrowing in shock and disbelief. For a heartbeat, the magnificent dog, the embodiment of Alexander's will, stood poised in defiance. Enough! Alexander barked, stepping forward, his hand raised to strike. But Titan recoiled, muscles taut, a warning glint sparking in those fierce eyes. The tension crackled like static electricity, the unspoken fracture between master and beast laid bare. Lila's breath caught in her throat. For the first time she glimpsed a crack in the unyielding dominance that had imprisoned them both. Titan was not just a weapon of control, he was trapped too. A dangerous thought took root in Lila's mind. If Titan could resist, even just a little, maybe, just maybe, they could turn this nightmare against its creator. The session ended abruptly, servants hurrying forward to leash Titan. Alexander's glare burned into Lila's soul as she was pushed back behind the fence, but inside, a fragile hope stirred. Tomorrow she would watch Titan's eyes again, and plan. The grand ballroom shimmered under glittering chandeliers. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, fine wine, and the faintest hint of smoke curling from ornate candelabras. Lila stood near the edge of the room, her elegant gown a cruel costume, soft silk that clung to her trembling frame, a stark contrast to the coarse rags she once wore. Her lips curved into a hollow smile, a mask to hide the knot tightening in her chest. She was a living ornament, a spectacle for Alexander King's decadent soirees, yet no one truly saw her. Not really. Guests swirled around in laughter and clinking glasses, their conversations a distant hum that barely reached her ears. The string quartet played a haunting melody that seemed to echo her own trapped heartbeats. Despite the opulence, the air felt suffocating, thick with whispered cruelty and invisible chains. Titan's deep barks echoed faintly from a hidden room, a reminder that she was nothing more than property in this gilded cage. Suddenly, a hand brushed against hers, a whisper of warmth in the cold sea of indifference. Turning, Lila met the eyes of a man she hadn't noticed before. His gaze was sharp but kind, a flicker of something dangerous lurking beneath. Without a word, he slipped a folded note into her palm and vanished into the crowd before she could speak. Heart pounding, Lila unfolded the note beneath the dim glow of a nearby sconce. The scrawled words promised help, outside allies, someone watching, someone who might care. But before she could read more, a sharp tug yanked the paper from her fingers. A tall servant appeared, eyes cold and unreadable, murmuring, "No distractions." The note disappeared into the folds of his coat. Lila's breath caught between hope and fear. Was this a lifeline or another trap? She scanned the crowd, searching for the stranger's face, but he was gone, lost in the sea of meaningless luxury. Alexander's voice boomed from across the room, commanding attention as he toasted his guests. The glittering cage had tightened, and the promise of freedom slipped away like smoke. Still, that single touch, that secret note, kindled a fragile ember inside her, a dangerous hope she dared to nurture. The night stretched on, but Lila's eyes never stopped searching. The cold concrete floor pressed against Lila's cheek as she lay curled in the dim kennel, the faint scent of disinfectant mixing with the sharp tang of stale air. The walls were thick, unforgiving stone, muffling the distant sounds of laughter and music from the grand halls beyond. Outside, Titan's deep barks echoed through the hallways, a cruel reminder of her captivity. The mansion's vastness swallowed her cries. No walls could contain the silent scream rising from within her. Her wrists throbbed from the tight iron cuffs that clinked faintly whenever she shifted. The ornate collar around her neck felt like a noose, heavy and humiliating. The thin scraps of food left beside her went untouched, hunger gnawing relentlessly, but pride and despair warring within her. The servants passed without a glance, their faces masks of indifference. To them, she was no more than a possession, an accessory to Titan's grandeur. Through the kennel bars, she watched as the dog was lavished with jewels and rich meats on silver platters. Titan's golden eyes gleamed with an unsettling mixture of dominance and unease, a mirror of Alexander's own cruelty. The contrast stabbed at Lila's heart. She was starved of dignity while the dog feasted like a king. A sharp rap on the kennel door jolted her from her thoughts. The head butler's cold voice cut through the silence. "You will learn your place, girl. Resistance only invites pain." Lila's jaw clenched, tears stinging as she swallowed her defiance. But inside, a fire burned hotter. She refused to be broken, to become a silent shadow in this gilded cage. The door creaked open, and a whip cracked through the air. Her body jerked with the sting, but her spirit did not yield. She bit back a scream, letting only a silent, shuddering sob escape. Her tears fell onto the cold floor, tracing invisible cracks in her resolve. Alone again, she pressed her palms against the bars, whispering through clenched teeth, "I won't disappear. No matter what they do, I'm still here." Somewhere beyond the mansion's walls, the sun dipped lower. But inside, Lila's silent scream grew louder, an ember waiting to ignite, and in the shadows Titan watched. Shadows stretched long across the marble floors, flickering under the cold glow of chandeliers. Lila sat on the edge of her gilded cage, the ornate bars casting jagged lines across her skin like scars. Her eyes tracked the servant who lingered too long near the hallway, a slight man with hollow cheeks and jittery hands. He glanced around nervously, as if the walls themselves whispered secrets he dared not repeat aloud. A faint clatter echoed behind her. Lila froze, heart thudding wildly. The servant's gaze snapped toward the sound, his breath quickening. She swallowed her fear and stepped forward, voice low but firm. "Why do you watch me like that? What do you want?" His eyes darted away, avoiding her gaze. I don't know what you mean," he stammered, but his trembling fingers betrayed him. He wiped his palms on his trousers, sweat glistening in the dim light. Lila's heart hammered. Could this be a crack in the fortress that held her, or a trap laid by Alexander's ever-watchful eyes? The mansion felt alive with quiet menace, every shadow a secret waiting to pounce. She recalled the whispered conversations overheard in the servants' quarters, rumors of spies and silence. Trust was a currency no one here could afford. "Are you afraid?" she pressed, inching closer. The servant flinched, eyes wide with panic. "Afraid of what you might see, or who you might betray?" A sudden noise down the corridor, a door slammed. The servant's face paled, his voice barely a whisper. "I must go." He turned sharply and hurried away, leaving Lila alone with the echo of his footsteps. The question gnawed at her. Was anyone truly on her side in this house of shadows? Or was she condemned to be watched, trapped, and silenced forever? Outside, faint moonlight spilled through the stained glass. Lila's breath caught. Trust was a dangerous game, but she had no choice. She would have to learn the rules or be lost in the darkness. A soft growl rumbled nearby. Titan's eyes gleamed in the gloom, watching. And somewhere beyond, Alexander waited. Lila's heart pounded as she slipped through the shadowed corridors, each step swallowed by the cold marble beneath her bare feet. The mansion felt endless, a labyrinth of gleaming halls and silent secrets. She clutched the thin silver key she'd stolen from a distracted servant, its cold weight a fragile promise of escape. Her fingers trembled as she traced its cool surface, the metal biting into her skin like a talisman against despair. The heavy door to Alexander's study loomed ahead, dark wood carved with ornate patterns that seemed to watch her approach. She hesitated, breath shallow, then slid the key into the lock. A soft click echoed like a gunshot in the silence. Inside, the room reeked of mahogany and leather, luxury masking something far darker beneath the surface. Stacks of papers littered the massive desk, their corners curled with age and neglect. Lila's fingers trembled as she rifled through contracts stamped with official seals. Her eyes widened in horror. Legal documents declaring her property, bound to Alexander's ownership with no avenue for appeal. No law would save her. She was trapped in a gilded cage, a possession. A pile of folders revealed another terrifying truth. Photos showed Titan, the monstrous dog, hooked up to machines. Graphs detailed genetic experiments. Alexander's obsession had twisted the creature into something inhuman. The dog was not merely a pet, but a weapon shaped by cruelty and science. A knot of rage coiled in Lila's chest. Her captor's madness was deeper than she had imagined. She was nothing more than a pawn in his grotesque game. Suddenly, footsteps approached. Panic surged. She shoved the documents into her dress and slipped out, heart racing, breath ragged. Back in the lavish kennel, Titan lounged, eyes sharp and alert. Alexander stood nearby, his cold gaze fixed on Lila. Without hesitation, she yanked the ornate collar from her neck, the chain clinking as it hit the marble floor. The sound was deafening in the silence. "I am not your possession," Lila declared, voice steady despite the storm inside her. Titan growled low, a mixture of warning and confusion. Alexander's lips curled into a sneer, but Lila met his stare without flinching. This was no longer a girl broken by chains. This was a woman clawing back her freedom, even if no one else would save her. The room held its breath, the next move hanging in the balance. The mansion trembled as Titan lunged, teeth flashing in the dim light. Alexander's smug calm shattered beneath the savage roar of his own monstrous creation. The air thickened with the scent of sweat and fear as the dog's glowing eyes locked onto his master, a primal fury unleashed. Lila stood frozen, heart hammering, watching the impossible unfold with wide, terrified eyes. "Titan, no!" Alexander gasped, stumbling backward, hands raised in vain to shield himself. But the dog was beyond command, a dark force breaking free from cold control. In that violent moment, Lila's chains fell away. Not just the metal that bound her neck, but the weight of years spent as invisible property. Her breath caught in her throat as she tore the ornate collar from her skin, the snap echoing like a gunshot through the marble hall. The chain clattered to the floor, a cymbal shattered. Titan's growl deepened, teeth sinking into Alexander's arm in a flash of raw power. The billionaire's scream ricocheted off the walls, mingling with the wail of alarms and the frantic clang of gates unlocking. Chaos surged like a tidal wave through the mansion. Lila didn't hesitate. She bolted, bare feet pounding the cold floor, breath ragged but fueled by raw, fierce resolve. Red emergency lights flickered, casting twisted shadows as she navigated the labyrinthine corridors. Servants screamed orders, but fear silenced their footsteps. The mansion's opulence blurred past, chandeliers swaying, portraits watching in silent horror. Ahead, the iron gates groaned open, revealing the cold dawn bleeding into the sky. Freedom beckoned. Behind her, the clash of teeth and flesh raged on as Titan's fury consumed Alexander. The dog's growls softened only when Lila crossed into the pale morning light, the first rays warming her skin like a promise. She didn't look back. For the first time, Lila wasn't the prey, but the hunter of her own fate. The gates slammed shut behind her, locking away the nightmare and the man who'd sold her to a dog. But outside, the city waited, silent, indifferent. Lila's fight was only just beginning. The city's grey dawn bled through cracked pavement and flickering street lamps as Lila stumbled out beyond the mansion gates. The iron bars clanged shut behind her with a finality that echoed like a death knell. Her body ached, bruised ribs, scraped knees, and the collar's sting still burned faintly on her neck. Titan padded silently at her side, his massive frame a dark, steady presence against the indifferent cityscape. The early morning air was sharp and cold, carrying the distant sounds of awakening traffic and the faint murmur of voices from the streets. Lila's throat was raw from shouting at empty walls, pleading with strangers who turned away before she could finish a word. Faces blurred past, eyes fixed on glowing screens or hurried errands, no one daring to meet hers. She pressed her back against a cold brick wall, the chill seeping through her threadbare shirt. A cigarette-burned bench was her only refuge, and she sank down, every muscle trembling with exhaustion and the weight of betrayal. Why does no one help?" she whispered, voice cracking like brittle glass as tears welled but refused to fall. Titan's deep, slow breath was the only answer. His amber eyes, once fierce, now softened, locked onto her with an almost human loyalty. He nudged her hand with his nose, a silent guardian unwilling to abandon her. She clenched her fists, tasting the bitter truth. Freedom was a hollow victory without justice. No rescue was coming. No heroes would sweep in from the shadows to shatter the nightmare. She had torn herself from the prison, but the world beyond the gates offered only apathy. A distant siren wailed, uncaring and relentless. Lila's gaze drifted upward, catching the indifferent glances of passers-by, businessmen, mothers, children, none stopping, none questioning. Their silence screamed louder than any chains. "I saved myself," Lila said, voice steadying with fierce resolve. "No one tried to save me." Titan shifted closer, his bulk a shield against the cold night. Together they rose from the gutter's edge, stepping into a city that refused to see them. But Lila's spirit, scarred but unbroken, ignited a new fire. This was only the beginning. Behind her, the mansion's shadow lingered, a dark promise that the fight was far from over. The chilly morning air bit at Lila's skin as she stepped into the cramped room where the activists gathered. The space was modest but alive, with faded posters lining the walls, slogans demanding justice and freedom scribbled in bold letters, and a flickering fluorescent light casting a harsh glare. Titan sat close by, his immense frame filling the corner, eyes calm yet alert. The faint scent of coffee and sweat mingled with the nervous energy pulsating through the room. The murmur of quiet conversations faltered as heads turned toward her, a mixture of skepticism and curiosity washing over the group. A woman with wire-rimmed glasses approached, her expression softening as she crouched to Titan's level. "He's beautiful," she whispered, brushing her hand gently over his thick fur. The others exchanged glances, skepticism melting into cautious curiosity and a growing sense of empathy. Lila's voice trembled as she began. "I was sold, not to a person, but to a dog, a billionaire's dog." The room fell silent, the weight of her words settling like a stone in the heavy air. She recounted the mansion's cold marble floors, the collar that marked her as property, and Titan's fierce, unexpected loyalty. Each detail carved a vivid picture in the listeners' minds, the horror now undeniable. An older man leaned forward, his eyes searching hers. "You're brave to come here. Most wouldn't survive what you did." His voice was gentle but firm, offering a flicker of genuine belief. For the first time in months, Lila felt a fragile thread of trust weaving between her and these strangers. They weren't just voices in the dark, they were allies, ready to fight the invisible war she'd waged alone. Outside, the city hummed indifferently, but inside the room, hope sparked. Titan shifted, nudging Lila's hand with his massive head. She squeezed his fur, a silent promise passing between them. "Tomorrow," she said, her voice steadier now, "we'll take this story to the streets. People need to know." The activists nodded, rallying around her. The first steps of a long battle had begun. As the sun dipped low beyond the window, Lila's gaze hardened. Freedom was a fragile thing, but she would protect it with every breath. The rally was only the beginning. Sunlight spilled across the park's dewy grass, casting warm gold over Lila's face. The soft rustle of leaves in a gentle breeze mingled with distant children's laughter, a sound so ordinary it almost felt foreign. Titan lay close by, his sleek coat gleaming under the morning light, his eyes calm and watchful. The scent of fresh earth and blooming flowers filled the air, a stark contrast to the cold silence of the mansion's ruined halls that now felt like a distant nightmare. The crumbled estate was now a ghost, a memory fading beneath the relentless march of time and the slow healing of scars. Lila's fingers traced Titan's fur, steady and sure. "You kept me safe," she whispered, voice rough but steady, carrying the weight of everything they'd survived. The dog's deep brown eyes met hers, a silent promise of loyalty that no words could capture. Freedom tasted bittersweet, hard-won but fragile. She felt the weight of every scar, every night spent in chains, yet here she was, breathing, alive. A mother called her child near, and the little boy toddled over, curiosity bright in his eyes. Titan's tail wagged gently, and Lila smiled, a genuine warmth spreading through her chest. Not long ago, such a moment would have been unthinkable. "I'm Lila," she said softly, kneeling to the child's level. "This is Titan." The boy reached out, fingers brushing Titan's nose, and the dog leaned into the touch without hesitation. Lila's heart swelled with a fragile hope. Here, in this simple connection, lay the first true taste of normalcy. Behind her, the city's skyline shimmered, a reminder of battles fought and won, and of justice that had come too late for some, but for Lila, it was a new beginning. She stood, inhaling deeply, the scent of fresh grass, blooming flowers and distant rain carried on the breeze. No more cages, no more collars. "Do you ever think about what comes next?" a voice asked softly. It was Mara, one of the activists who had helped rebuild Lila's shattered trust. Lila's gaze lifted to the horizon, where the sun painted the sky with hues of pink and gold. "Every day," she said, voice steady, "but now, I choose what comes next." Titan nudged her hand, grounding her. Together they faced a world finally waking to justice, slowly, painfully, but undeniably ready to listen, and for the first time in years, Lila felt the future unfolding before her, full of possibility and fierce hope.